So my first question to you is, after writing like the legendary Watergate scandal, did you feel pressured after that to only write about presidential scandals? And how did that story impact your career?
I've done books on a variety of things, but one thing you learn as a reporter, it's the best job in America, in the world. In fact, I often have thought if somebody comes from Mars and then goes back to Mars and is asked, who in America has the best jobs? They'd say the reporters. And then they would ask, well, why? And the answer is we get to make momentary entries into people's lives and then get the hell out. And if you're a doctor, you're stuck with sometimes boring patients. If you're a lawyer, you're always stuck with boring clients. And so in journalism, what's news? Something we don't know about, something you can expand on. So you're working on things that have immense relevance. Okay, good. I'll hand the microphone back to you.
Great.
Okay.
And then my next question is, from covering both the Nixon Watergate scandal and now the Trump tapes, how would you compare the two presidencies? And they're both kind of abuse of power.
Yeah, well, you know, comparing them is going to take a panel of psychiatrists. And there are many similarities. And at the same time, they're different. But these tapes that we put out a couple of weeks ago, have any of you ever done something where you don't understand it fully until you kind of immerse yourself in it completely? Mm-hmm. I didn't understand how, quite frankly, what Trump did on the virus was a cover-up, really criminal. And what's interesting about the business of reporting is, as we know, events occur in chronological order, right? There's no way you can change that. But when you're reporting on things, you don't learn them in chronological order. And I learned many months after starting these interviews with Trump that he'd been given a warning about the virus on January 28th. And he lied to his son, lied to me, lied to the public. And it took me a long time to get the details about the warning he got. But it's the most serious warning I've ever heard about a president getting. When the National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, went to him at a top secret president's daily brief meeting on the 28th of January and said, this virus is coming and it's going to be the biggest national security threat to your presidency. Now, not Iran, not Russia, not China, but the virus. And it turned out, do you have any idea how many people died in the United States because of the virus?
Over 1 million.
Pardon?
Over 1 million.
Pardon?
It's over 1 million.
Yeah, 1.1 million people. And if Trump had been honest about the warning he got, instead of telling me and telling, oh, it's going to go away, don't worry, I try to downplay it because I don't want to panic people.
So because you've covered such intimidating and outrageous figures like Trump and have had to write about these difficult situations, do you feel that news truly can be unbiased?
That's going to require another panel. But it's a great question. But one of the things that we have to understand in journalism and as we watch politics, the truth is not neutral, right? 2 and 2 is 4, right? If somebody argues, no, it's really 5, we can prove it's 4. Now, in the internet age of impatience and speed, everyone wants things reduced to a sentence or a headline, right? And if you can spend time with things in a deep inquiry or an investigation, I think you really have a chance of getting a factual basis so we can say certain things with pretty close to certainty. And so if you're doing 2 and 2 equals 4 and you're writing say you're a math PhD, and in the paper you wouldn't devote half the space to it's 5, right? You'd maybe say there are some people who say it's 5, but this is why it's not true.
So along with that, how do you feel that reporting bias in the media has changed within your lifetime, especially lately?
Well, boy, I mean, it's a divided country, right? And I think sometimes there's bias, but generally reporters make a good faith effort to get it right. Some people intentionally don't. Again, the truth is not neutral. I don't know how you remedy that. Let me ask you, what's the most important thing going on in the world now, in your view?
To me personally, I believe that, just from a personal perspective, the war in Ukraine, just because that affects my family.
How does it affect your family?
Well, my mom is Ukrainian, my mom's side of family is Ukrainian, and I grew up in Russia, so I feel like I have very varying perspectives of growing up, but that was for me personally, and I want to know about Jordan.
Sure.
For me, I would currently, because like you said, it changes. I would say women's rights, because we're dealing with abortion here in the U.S. and then in Iran they're dealing with literal murder of women just because of the morality police. So I think women's rights all over the world is the most important thing to me right now.
Okay, those are 2 really good answers, important answers.
We really appreciate you speaking with us because as college students, we feel that activism, being passionate about the topics that we are passionate about is incredibly important. So that can become very difficult in entering the workforce as young journalists and especially navigating that field through college. So what difficulties do you think young journalists are facing today and will be in the future?
First, getting a job, right? That's a really important starting point. And it's shrinking, but I'm so glad you mentioned the war in Ukraine. I was giving a talk the other day and it went on for 2 hours with questions, and I realized at the end we did not touch on the war in Ukraine. And I think people, certainly not yourself, in this country have grown numb to what's going on because it doesn't seem, oh yeah, that's on television, it's awful. It's not for you, obviously, but I think for lots of Americans.
I wanted to ask you about what do you hope for the future of journalism, since currently it is so polarized and media has become very biased?
Well, I mean, yes, media is divided, and there is lots of bias because I think there are people who, think they can find all the truth based on ideology or who they like or partisanship, and so that is a serious problem. But you asked the question about journalism. Do you either of you know who Catherine Graham was? No, that's okay. That's okay. She died before you were born, Robert. She was the owner and the publisher of the Washington Post. And a very, very strong woman, and supported our work on Watergate, even when it got hot, even when we made mistakes, which we did. But so after Nixon resigned, she wrote Carl Bernstein and myself a personal letter. Now, she had more stationery than any 500 people in Washington, probably. But she wrote on a yellow legal pad, "Dear Carl and Bob, Nixon's resigned and you did some of the stories. Quote, now don't start thinking too highly. Let me give you some advice. And the advice is beware the demon pomposity. Beware the demon pomposity." What important advice for journalists, for academics, for people on Wall Street, for people in Hollywood, and even an occasional politician we find has been overtaken by the demon pomposity. Pomposity does not work, and you can feel like you're doing a good job, trying to do a good job on things, but pomposity is a kind of smugness and self-satisfaction that you know the answers and you've got everything. And I think in the back of my mind, I hope most of the time, I'm sure I fall off the wagon on this, but about the demon pomposity. Something to worry about and act on, and so much of it has to do with the treatment of people.